gamers? Today on Dice and Dragons we're doing something a little bit different. I am going to be reviewing Star Wars Rebellion by Fantasy Flight Games, designed by Corey Konitska. Now the reason I'm doing it solo is partially because Julie didn't want to do it. She's still mad about me blowing up her Death Star, and I wanted to do this review to time it with Solo, a Star Wars story. She said, well, you know what, if it's because of Solo, you can do it solo. Also, Sammy G and I haven't had the time lately to sit down and get this big war game in a box to the table. Now the game is for 2 to 4 players. We'll give some comments on that in the review of the game after we show you guys how to play it. The game does last 3 to 4 hours. It is quite the big game, and as you may have heard on some other channels, they like to call it the original series, the original trilogy in a box. Now, is that true? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned to find out. As always, you can find our timestamps down below in the video description. So if you've played the game already, or if you just want our commentary on the game, feel free to go ahead and pick one of the timestamps to a later point in the video. Now with that being said, as always here on Dice and Dragons, we're going to grab our drinks. But as you know, this is Star Wars. We're going to do things a little differently since I'm flying solo. And what is, well, Han Solo's best friend is a blaster, but I don't really have any DL-44s lying around. So I'm going to say grab a saber. And let's take this game to the table. Emperor, I'm coming for you. Now we're going to take a look at the components that you get in Star Wars Rebellion. But before we do that, I just want to highlight how you can win the game. Now for the Imperial player, there are 2 ways to do it. You can either use the Death Star to blow up the Rebel base, or you defeat all the Rebel forces and destroy their base, meaning that the Rebellion cannot recover and the Empire shall rule supreme across the galaxy. Now the way for the Rebels to win is that as more time goes on and as they complete more of their objectives, they gain favor across the galaxy in different systems. And then once the time marker, which we'll talk about in the setup and how to play, reaches the same place that the Rebel objective marker is, that's when the Rebellion will win the game. All right, so let's take a look at the components. And as you can see, we've got a massive galaxy out in front of me. And just so you guys notice, it's actually 2 boards. So that's just how big the scope of this game is. And to be honest, I love it. I love the fact that we've got so many places from Star Wars canon that are available to us, whether it's from the original trilogy or going back to the prequel trilogy, and even some of the other things that they've done, such as the Clone Wars. I mean, you've got Ryloth over here. It's just really, really cool. Now let's take a look at the other components. I'll start with the dice. So we have these 4 custom dice. Well, there's actually more than just 4. There are a total of 10 of them. And what we'll do is we'll take a closer look at the faction boards, at the different units, and the dice themselves before we get into the setup and the how to play. Speaking of the faction boards, you can see that there are 2 faction boards right there. Now you've got one for the Galactic Empire and one for the Rebel Alliance. They are also double-sided, depending on how many players you are playing with, whether it's 2, 3, or 4, you will be using one of the sides of the board. There is one side for a single player, there's another side for 2 players. Now you can see here all of the different miniatures that we have. So for the Empire, we've got the AT-ST, you've got your TIE Fighter, you've got your Stormtrooper, your AT-AT, the Assault Shuttle. We have, of course, the staple Imperial Star Destroyers. You've got the 1st and 2nd Death Star. And just to highlight it, you also have the Super Star Destroyer, which I love, the Executor. Now, just to make sure that we're clear on this, there are certain units that are good for space. There are others that can be used for ground. So for example, out of the Imperial units, the Stormtrooper, AT-AT, and the AT-ST are the ground units. Now let's take a look at the Rebel units. We have our Snowspeeders, our Mon Calamari cruisers. We have, of course, our X-Wings. I couldn't resist doing that. I mean, everyone loved thinking and dreaming about flying X-Wings when they were a kid, if you're a Star Wars fan, and don't know too many people that don't enjoy the original trilogy. You have your Corellian Corvette, the Y-Wings, the ion cannons, a little bit difficult to see. We've got, of course, the shield generators from Hoth, great way to protect your base, and of course, the Rebel Trooper. Now, same thing as with the Empire. Some of the ships are for space combat, others are for ground combat. With regard to the Rebels, it is the Snowspeeder, the ion cannon, the shield generator, and the Trooper. Now that we've covered that, let's take a look at some of the tokens that you get in the game. There's quite a few of them. So we have here what are known as attachment rings. Now, I'm not going to be covering the attachment rings in full detail. There are quite a few of them. You can easily look them up in the Learn to Play and the rules reference. Everything you need to know about them is there. The two that I have actually placed out here, one is for capturing a leader. The other, the lightning one, if I'm not mistaken, represents twisting somebody to the dark side. So for example, if Luke gets captured, you would then place him with the captured ring. The rebel cannot use them. And then if you've got the right card, you might be able to twist Luke to the dark side. So if you were ever one of those people that wondered why Luke didn't join Darth Vader and the Emperor to rule the galaxy, well, in your version of Star Wars that you're playing with Rebellion, it just may happen. Now, we have the sabotage markers right here. And you might be wondering what sabotage markers are for. We'll go into it more in the how to play. But sabotage markers show up when rebels go ahead and sabotage systems. That affects what they are able to produce. Now, you'll notice here on the board, there are a bunch of different markings in certain systems. That tells you what they're able to produce for you. And if you look on the faction sheet, it tells you what items can be, what units can then be manufactured. And sabotaging affects unit production. We have the Rebel loyalty markers, which we'll use to mark if a system is loyal to the Rebel Alliance. There are then also the Imperial loyalty markers. And what you'll notice is the Imperial loyalty markers are double-sided. When you are the Empire, you will either have a system that's loyal to you, or you can potentially occupy it, which is very thematic. You are forcing the populace to work for the Empire, even though they would rather, maybe not rather, but they're a little bit more sympathetic to the rebels' cause, and they don't really like you. You have, of course, the damage tokens. You can see here they come with 2 units and 1 unit denominations. Then the last 2 tokens we will take a look at are the time marker and the rebel loyalty marker. Well, I don't think it's loyal, but it's their objective marker. It is the reputation marker. This represents how well the Rebel Alliance is doing across the galaxy, what their reputation is, if people believe in them, if they want the Republic back, or if they think that they're just going to be another empire and people don't really believe in what they're trying to accomplish. Now let's take a look at some of the leaders. You get a total of, if I'm not mistaken, 25 leaders in the box. I took out just a couple of them for some flavor. So we have Darth Vader and, of course, Boba Fett. Now you'll notice down here they have different abilities, and we'll talk about those more in the how to play. They represent different things that your leaders are good at, and different kinds of missions that they're able to accomplish throughout the course of the game, which will get you more resources, more power, and potentially control over more and more systems. We have, of course, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. Gotta love those guys. And the reason why I picked those 4 is to show you guys that you're really getting a flavor of the original trilogy. You got some of the best heroes around. Now we'll take a look at the other things we have. We've got some cards. We've got the action card deck for the Imperials and the Rebels. Now they are a little bit different. They do different things. They're how you're going to be able to recruit heroes, get some great cards, like the card 1 in a Million. Don't forget that that's out there. That lets you destroy the Death Star in 1 shot. It's pretty cool. I actually like that card. Julie didn't like it too much, but I really enjoyed it. We've got the Tactics card. We've got the Space and Ground Tactics cards, which are going to boost your troops' abilities in combat depending on where they are. We've got the probe deck, and now the probe deck is used to locate the rebel base. And it's used for, I believe, another thing in setup if you're not setting up the tutorial. But the probe deck is going to be key, and it's how the Empire is going to work towards tracking down the Rebel Alliance. Then we have, of course, the mission deck, the Imperial mission deck, and the Rebel mission deck. And then we've got a deck here that is only for the Rebel Alliance. You notice that they're labeled 3, a little mixed up here, 1 and 2. But that's perfect because you guys can see all of it. Now those are the Rebel objective cards. And that's how the Rebel Alliance is going to go about winning the game. Either by lasting so long that the time marker, and we'll just show you right here, which would start, here with the Rebel reputation marker here, lasting so much so that the time marker gets all the way up to 14, or by completing objectives and moving down the track to intercept the time marker and successfully convincing the galaxy to overthrow the Empire. Now the last component we're going to take a look at is the destroyed system token. Now this token would go on a system that has been potentially destroyed by the Death Star. Not potentially, is destroyed by the Death Star. It means that the planet's gone and can no longer be used for generating resources. You can still move through the system, but the whole planet is poof, bye-bye. And kind of appropriate that I placed it over Yavin 4, because if I was playing the Empire, I'm sure I would have succeeded in blowing up Yavin, unlike what actually happened. But just to give you an idea, if you blow up a planet like Mon Calamari, you're taking away some serious shipbuilding potential from your opponent, which can be very, very powerful depending on where you're at in the game. Now that we've taken a close look at the components, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the faction boards, their units, and talk a little bit more about the custom dice. So stay tuned, because I'll be right back. We're going to start by taking a look at the Rebel Alliance faction board. We'll get into the custom dice when we get to the Imperial faction, and after we take a look at both factions in detail, I will show you guys the second side of the board. The reason for that is I felt it made sense to explain how you're going to potentially recruit leaders. So I've set up the game board and the timeline tracker, which is crucial into how you will recruit leaders. Now let's talk about the different units. You can see we have the X-Wings, Y-Wings, the Rebel transports that I forgot about, the Corellian corvettes, and the Mon Calamari cruisers. Now these are all your space units, and they will do different things. The Rebel transport, for example, can take troops, so Rebel troopers, and I believe the air speeders, if I'm not mistaken, 2 different systems across the board. You could, for example, move from Yavin to Felucia, for example. Now you'll also notice that you've got these blue icons. Now these blue icons correspond to everything that's in space, meaning planets like Mon Calamari are great at building large capital ships. You've got the square, which corresponds to the Mon Calamari cruiser. You then also have the triangle, which corresponds with some of the smaller starfighters, which means controlling Mon Cala, great way to build a large star fleet. You can also see Felucia over here is great for ground troops, and Megiddo over here is ground units as well as some space units. So there are different places on the board that will let you build different kinds of units. Now the Rebel Trooper, the Airspeeder, the Shield Generator, and the Ion Cannon are all ground-based units, and you need those icons right there to build them. You will notice on the leaders right here, they have this little symbol here, which means they have to be recruited. These are not your starting leaders. I picked them because, of course, they're the big heroes of the rebellion, but you'd have to potentially recruit them. Now, the way leader recruitment works is you take, as the game progresses, you move the time track marker, and anywhere there's the symbol that I just pointed out that is also on the board, you draw 2 action cards, and you're then able to pick one of the leaders that show up. Now this is a terrible draw, as the only one I could pick would be potentially Crix Maydeen. Now we'll just put them back. I want to get a better draw to give you guys a better example. So we have 1, 2. Now you'll see we've got our most desperate hour and target Star Destroyers. We can pick between either Princess Leia and Wedge Antilles. When we make that choice, we would then keep this action card face down, and the other one would either be put at the top or the bottom of the deck. And then it would come back up again as we go to another recruitment phase. And that is how recruiting leaders works. That's how building units work. Now let's talk a little bit about what these units can do. You'll notice that there's black and red on everything. Now the reason for that is they're different types of damage. Black damage is related to starfighter damage or maybe anti-air fire from either like a Corellian corvette, Mon Calamari cruiser. The Empire has similar options on their heavy ships as well. Then you'll see the black damage that is available on the ground units. So troopers are really good at shooting other troopers, whereas the airspeeder is good at shooting troopers, but can also do some damage to larger capital ships. You notice that the shield generator here and the ion cannon have other different abilities. They're not really related to doing specific damage because these symbols here are the type of dice you're able to roll, whereas the shield generator and the iron cannon have different abilities instead of rolling dice for damage. Now, for example, the X-Wing fighter rolls one black die and would be dealing black damage, whereas the Y-Wing as a bomber rolls one red die and deals red damage. Now, there are ways to use the red or black die to damage the opposite color. I'll talk about that when I get into the custom dice. But you can see as you're building your units, you need to build something that's going to be an effective counter against your opposing faction ideally, or that's something that's going to suit the kind of mission that you're trying to do. If you're trying to get in and do some quick damage, maybe you want to build a fleet of Y-Wings if you're trying to take out Star Destroyer, but you don't want to spend a lot of large resources. If you're looking at defense, maybe you want to build shield generators to defend your bases as well as the rebel base. Maybe you want ion cannons to negatively affect opponents. So let's just take a look at what the ion cannon does. Is during each space battle step, your opponent rolls 2 fewer red die. So that can be really great, especially if you've got them on your Imperial base. If the Empire finds you, you can actually maybe even win that space engagement. So now we've taken a quick look at the Rebel Alliance troops. I don't want to get into too much detail about it. This game is big. There's a lot to take a look at. I'm just going to put the action card back and we'll take a look at some of the mission deck right here. Now, as you can see, we've got specific missions. For example, seeking Yoda, plan the assault. It tells you what value that you need to have to be able to undertake this mission. You then have to successfully resolve the mission. We'll talk about that in the how to play. And afterwards, if you resolve the mission, you go through what's on the card. So for example, if Luke Skywalker resolved this mission, also replace his leader with Luke Skywalker Jedi, which we have right here. So you have to do this with Luke Skywalker, the regular Luke, but you can turn him into a Jedi Knight. Now you'll see plan the assault. You get some bonuses for plan the assault from Jan the Donna. You can attempt in any system that contains an Imperial ship. If successful, you follow this part of the card. We'll take a look at the mission cards in more detail as we go into the playthrough, but I just wanted to give you guys a taste so you can see what to expect and how the Rebel Alliance really captures that original trilogy flavor with things like Seek Yoda and Plan the Assault, which, you know, really plays back into A New Hope with Jan the Donna planning the assault on the Death Star and Luke Skywalker trying to find Yoda. Now we'll take a quick look at the objective cards. So you can play this during certain phases. So for example, this one, the start of a refresh phase. Play if at least 4 rebel systems contain a rebel unit, and that would give the rebels 1 extra reputation, moving them closer down the time track. We've looked at, this is a level 1. Let's see what you could get with a level 2 objective. Now, this one we've got combat. If you have at least 1 fighter after the space battle step, reveal this card to roll 3 die, and then depending on what you roll, if you roll a direct hit, and we'll talk about it in the custom dice, play this card and destroy a Death Star in this system, otherwise return this card to your hand. Well, that's kind of neat. This will let you, so this is called Death Star Plans. And it's off the thing, sorry. So this is called the Death Star Plans. And if you roll direct hit, you can shoot down the Death Star without having 1 in a million, plus get 2 extra reputation points. So that is a really good card to affect the Empire. We'll take a look at a level 3 now. Now with regards to a level 3, level 3 is another, once again, Death Star Plans. Put that down. Let's take a look at another one. Here we go. A level 3 one. You may get play after at least 3 healths worth of Imperial ships have been destroyed in a combat that you initiated. So major victory, meaning you succeed in a space battle, and then once again, moving your reputation marker closer. And it's by playing and succeeding at these objective cards that the Rebel player moves up their timing to win. Otherwise, if you can't successfully complete any of them, you're going to have to wait till the time marker gets to 14. And there's things the Empire player may do to push your reputation marker back, which means it can take longer to win the game. Now that we've taken this look at the Rebel Alliance faction, let's take a look at the Empire. So stay tuned, they're coming right up. Now we're going to take a look at the Imperial player, but before that we're going to take a look at the dice. Now I said we'd show you the custom dice. Now the first symbol I want to show you is this one. The 2 clashing lightsabers means that you're able to use one of your tactic cards, whether it is for a space combat or a ground combat. You then have the hit markers, which represent 1 damage of the type of color that the die is. So this means 1 black damage. Now, if you'd rolled this same symbol on a red die, this would be 1 red damage. Now, the other symbol that there is the direct hit. Now, the direct hit means it can be 1 damage of any type. So this black die could actually be used to apply red damage. And that is how the custom dice work. Now let's take a look at the Imperial units. So you can see we have our TIE Fighter, the Assault Carrier, the Star Destroyers, Super Star Destroyer, the Death Star. We have our Stormtrooper, AT-ST, AT-AT, the resources we need to construct them, as you can see here. But there is a slight difference on the larger cards, such as, not the cards, the large units, such as the Star Destroyer, as well as the Death Stars. Now, please note, you can only have 1 fully functioning Death Star at a time. That's why there is the Death Star and the Death Star under construction. As you can see, the Death Star under construction can be destroyed via just regular damage, whereas the Death Star, when it's not under construction, cannot be destroyed by regular damage. Now, you'll notice here you need cards. What that means is you require project cards. As you can see here, there are different project cards that the Imperial player has access to, which will let them build things like the Super Star Destroyer, as you can see right here. There's also the one that lets them construct another Death Star, which you're able to do if you happen to get your Death Star destroyed by the Rebel Alliance. As before, you have the mission deck, which is similar to the other ones. As you can see, you've got their specific missions, Lure of the Dark Side, and that's actually kind of cool that I just pulled this one. With the Lure of the Dark Side, you can attempt against a captured leader, count all skill icons during this attempt, and if you're successful, you can attach the Lure of the Dark Side ring to them. You have corrupted that rebel leader, which I think is awesome. You've got the interrogation droid. So as you can see, some fairly heinous and villainous missions. You can see from the leaders you got here, some great guys you can recruit like Boba Fett, and of course, the man himself, Darth Vader, who you get to start with. The Imperial action deck is right there. I'm not going to go through them. The other thing I wanted to highlight that I didn't do for the Rebels, but you can see it here as well, and it's a little clearer. I'll just move the Star Destroyer out of the way. You have these logos that are numbers, actually. Sorry, I shouldn't say logos. There are numbers next to the logos on the card. These are what your ships are able to transport. So this assault carrier can transport 4 units, and that includes TIE fighters, because as everyone knows, TIE fighters don't have hyperdrives. So you can place, for example, 2 TIEs 2 stormtroopers and transport them to another system with the assault carrier, 6 units with your Star Destroyer, 8 units with your Super Star Destroyer, 8 units as well with your Death Star. And that is the Imperial player board. We're going to cut right here and we'll set up the game for you. And let's see how you do that. Now we're just going to take a quick look at the other side of each of the faction cards. And you can see that there are 2 leader pools, one for the General, one for the Admiral. Same with the Rebels. And you can take a look in the rule book. There are instructions on how you would play a team game, but essentially the General and the Admiral have slightly different things that they can do, and they control their own set of leaders. Other than that, all the information is the same on each of the faction cards, and I just really wanted to give you guys a quick snapshot of that. We're now going to continue into the setup and then followed by the how to play, so keep on watching. Now, I've gone ahead and started doing the setup for the game. I just did the setup portion that is on page 4 of the Learn to Play, which is getting the objective cards ready, setting your Rebel reputation marker, the time marker, and separating the Imperial project cards. We've also separated the starting mission cards for the Rebels. You notice your starting mission cards are denoted by this symbol here, and I've just put them aside. And I've done the same thing for the Imperials. And that's really the basics of getting set up. You also take your 4 starting leaders. Now, when you're looking at the starting leaders, I gotta say the Imperial leaders are a lot cooler. You do get Palpatine, Vader, and Moff Tarkin, whereas you get Leia, Mon Mothma, 2 pretty cool ladies, but then it's General Rieekan and Jan Dodonna. Not as cool as some of the other guys that you have out there. And we're going to go through the advanced setup process because I want to make sure that you guys at home are clear on how to do that, because when you're playing the game, most of the time you're not going to follow the first game setup. It's going to be the advanced setup process. To that end, I have separated all of the units that you're going to be needing for the advanced setup. And just to highlight, I did make a mistake on my Imperial player portion of the video. You can actually have 2 Death Stars. You can't have more than 2. You can have up to 2 if you are crushing the Rebel Alliance in your fist. Now we'll go through how you set up the game. First thing you're going to do is you're going to take your probe deck and you're going to deal out cards. And you're looking to get specific systems. As you can see right here, this system is neutral. We need to get 3 systems with the Rebel marker and 5 systems with the Imperial marker. As you can see, it can take a little while before we actually get anything. Going through just all of the neutral systems right here. We've got our first Imperial. Here's our first Rebel. Neutral, neutral, another neutral. Jeez. As you can, there's our 3 Rebel. Just going to do this a little bit quicker. That's also Rebel. My Jito, we have another Imperial one. Rebel. Mustafar. Corellia. And Seleucami. Now, we've gone ahead and we have separated out the systems. Now, I know you guys didn't get a good shot of it on the camera. I'll bring the systems up closer. Now, the Rebel Alliance has Naboo, Bathawi, and Kashyyyk. What you're then going to do, you can also see where they're located, what sector, what region of space, by the information at the bottom of the card. We will then set up the Rebel loyalty markers on those systems. Kashyyyk, Bathawi, and Naboo. The 3 Rebel cards are then returned to the probe deck. Now, the first 2 Imperial cards we drew were Rhodia and Mygeeto. Now what happens is these two places are subjugated by the Empire. They are not Imperial strongholds, but the Empire does have a presence in these systems. These two cards are then returned to the game box. And the reason for that is the Rebel player cannot hide their Rebel base on an Imperial planet. Next, we have Corellia, Seleucami, and Mustafar that are Imperial controlled. There's Corellia, Mustafar, and where is old Seleucami? There is Seleucami. All right. And that is the Imperial player setup. Now, when it comes to the Imperial player, you have to have at least one of your ground troops on each Imperial planet when you're starting the game. And there are my 5 soldiers. I have a total of 12 stormtroopers, 12 TIE fighters, 3 Star Destroyers, 1 AT-AT, and 5 ATSCs that I'm able to deploy as the Empire. When I am the Rebel Alliance, it is 6 soldiers, 2 X-Wings. I have an extra one here, actually. It is 2 Y-Wings, 2 Airspeeders, and 1 Corellian Corvette. You can see that the might of the Empire differs greatly from the scrappy band of rebels, which I actually like because it is very thematic. The other thing with the Rebel Alliance is you do not need to have troops at that location. You can assign some of the troops to the Rebel base. Now you're going to decide what location is your Rebel base, and that's actually one of the final phases, but we'll do it right now. And you don't want to hide it necessarily next to the Imperial player. And just looking at everything, you can pick from any of the systems that are available. And a nice place to hide the Rebel base would be, I'm going to pick Ryloth. Yeah, I like Ryloth. Ryloth is out of the way from the Empire, and that's where the Rebel base is going to be. What you would then do is you take this location card and you slide it under that location of the Rebel base. And you make sure to hide that from the Imperial player, otherwise it's going to be a short game. After that, shuffle back up the probe deck and go ahead and place it on the table. Now the next thing you need to do is to deploy all of your troops. And this is actually an interesting setup. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to maybe reset the game to maybe show you guys how to play or how to do some combat, but we've got some interesting theaters of battle potential here. And I'm going to have the Empire, reinforce quite a bit of troops on Rhodia, because there are some filthy Rebel planets nearby, and yeah, I want to capture them. We'll have some troops on Mustafar. Don't want to not protect Corellia. Corellia is a really great shipyard, so make sure to get some good solid forces there. Don't want to forget about our TIE fighters. Get the assault carriers on the board too. Let's not forget some of the other planets too. Seleucami's all right. We can just have a nice small garrison over here. We'll definitely want the bulk of our forces able to strike at the heart of the Rebel Alliance quite quickly and swiftly. And don't forget to maybe spread out some of your assault carriers, your troop transports. You don't want to have them all in one spot. They are great defense, but you'll need them out there to potentially move your troops around the board. And maybe I shouldn't have put all my ATSTs right here. I think I should have put another one on Rhodia. That's just too good of an opportunity with Naboo and Bathawi right next door. And I have now set up the Imperial player. Let's play some units for the Rebellion. Now, looking at the board in terms of resources, you're going to get a lot more out of Naboo than what you're going to potentially be getting out of Bathawi. So it would be it's not a bad idea for the rebels to try to reinforce and potentially defend Naboo from the might of the Empire. Strategically, though, if this was your setup, you may want to abandon Naboo, even Bathawi, and as the rebellion try to stir up some trouble in other sectors of the galaxy. It's not really a great setup, but this is what we got, and it's going to let me explain combat to you guys. So the Rebel Alliance is going to be really reinforcing it. Don't forget that you want some units on your base. You don't have to, but it's always good to have something there just in case the Empire happens to stumble on it. I can't forget Bathawi. We'll have well, maybe we'll put a Y-wing here, put the X-wing here. We'll want a few units here to potentially defend from the might of the Empire. Now, the last thing we need to do for the setup is we have our 4 starting cards. We draw 2 cards. Each player takes 2 cards off of their starting mission deck. And then you have your starting hand. So now each player has their starting hand. And we're going to take you guys through the how to play. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through each of the different phases. We're going to go about how you complete missions. And then we'll take a look at combat. We've got quite the mess already on the board with a crazy battle going on near Naboo and Rhodia. Well, not going on yet, but we're going to have one. It's going to be pretty cool. So keep it right here as we'll see if the rebels can withstand the might of the Empire. I know I'm getting a little bit excited on the Imperial side, but I mean, how can you not? You just have so many more troops. But I am repping the Rebel logo, so inside I'm rooting for them. Keep it right here. Now, before we get into the how to play, I realized I neglected to place the Death Star. Now, I don't necessarily want to bring the Death Star into combat right away. Don't currently have any cards on the Imperial side here to blow up, say, Naboo or Bathawi, because that would be awesome if I was the Imperial player. But I do want to get it close to combat still. So I will place the Death Star at Mustafar. Now, what we're going to do for the first part of the how to play is really go over missions, how you assign leaders to missions, and how you can potentially succeed at missions, as well as how your opponent can potentially oppose you. Now, there are 4 types of skills in Rebellion. You have Princess Leia, who has the blue intel icons. She has the yellow diplomacy. She has red for spec ops. There is also the white one, as you can see here, logistics. I noticed that Mon Mothma is a lot more strong in terms of diplomacy. And when you take a look at Jan Dodonna, he's very good at intel, a little bit of diplomacy. Now let's take a look at Darth Vader. He is your bruiser with a lot more spec ops and some diplomacy. I mean, he is the Sith Lord and the right hand of the Emperor. Then we take a look at Palpatine here. You can see he's got intel and diplomacy as his strength, which makes sense as the way the Emperor took over the galaxy. Now, what you're able to do on your turn is there's an assignment phase, and what you start out by doing, I'll just move these reinforcements out of the way here a little bit. You go through your missions and you assign your leaders to specific missions. Seek Yoda is a great one. That's nice to keep. You've got, for example, infiltration, sabotage, build an alliance, rapid mobilization. And one thing I do want to highlight, you can see this here, You've got this mission, which means resolve. If it says resolve in the mission, it automatically happens. There is no way for a player to oppose it. When it says attempt, while you're attempting that, it means that the opposing player can potentially stop you from being successful in that mission. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to assign different leaders to these missions. You play the cards face down. The opposing player does the same thing, and then you're going to reveal the missions later on, and you also get the opportunity to oppose them. That's also when combat could potentially occur, but I want to just break it down a little bit so you guys can see how you would actually do it in terms of when you're playing the game. Now, for Princess Leia, I would play Build Alliance, and that would be on Corellia. Not Corellia, sorry, Mon Calamari. The resources on Mon Calamari in terms of starship building could potentially get the Rebels a Mon Calamari cruiser. That's something that they just can't afford not to do. And then we'll try to pull off some sabotage. And the reason why the Rebels would most likely want to do sabotage is you don't want the Empire building more Star Destroyers. I'm just going to move this out of the way here, give myself just a little bit more room to work with. We'll take a look at what we have with the Imperial cards. Now, we've ruled by fear, which is interesting. So when it comes to gaining loyalty, you'll notice that Build an Alliance has a successful gain 1 loyalty. Rule by fear means gain 1 loyalty. The way loyalty works in the game is that, let me take a marker just so to show you guys, and we'll bring it over to Felucia. In this case, there's no loyalty in the system. If you gain 1 loyalty, you gain control of the system. However, with the Empire, if you lose a loyalty but you have troops there, the system becomes subjugated, and you would have to either get rid of the troops or remove that to get rid of, or gain another loyalty to make the planet flip to be a rebel planet, for example. So that's why there's multiple levels of loyalty, because the Empire can either have a planet loyal to it, or it can have a planet subjugated. Now that that's out of the way, we've got rule by fear, and I think that makes sense for Grand Moff Tarkin to maybe take over Rhodia. I mean, we've subjugated it. We want it to be under our control. And then looking at the other stuff, we do want to find out where the rebel base is. So gather intel would be good, and we could assign it to Emperor Palpatine. Now, I don't just have to assign 2 missions. It could be up to 4, but that would mean I'd have no leaders left to potentially oppose the other player as to what they're doing. Now that we've gone through the assignment phase, I'm going to just cut right here. I'd rather do this in smaller chunks for you guys, and we'll go through the reveal process and how you can potentially oppose somebody as they try to complete a mission. So keep it right here. We've assigned our leaders. We're ready to complete our missions. Let's see what's going to happen. Now we're at the point in the game where you're going to be revealing the missions. It's at this point that you would also potentially deploy commanders to lead troops into combat. And that does happen all at the same time, but I'll get into that afterwards. I really just want to focus on the mission aspect right now. Now, Princess Leia is going to Mon Calamari to attempt to secure their loyalty by building an alliance. And in this case, building an alliance is not something that we really want them to do. We do also want to attack them at Naboo. Letting them gain control of Mon Calamari is just not good. And this is a diplomacy mission, something that Princess Leia is rather strong in. we'll go ahead and deploy Darth Vader. Lord Vader is going to oppose her at that location. General Riken is going to attempt sabotage in the Corellia system. And General Todd does have the Spec Ops to oppose him. However, we really want to attack the Rebel Alliance. We're not going to try to oppose him in that case. We've got Grand Moff Tarkin attempting to rule by fear with diplomacy at Rhodia. And while Rhodia is already controlled by the Empire, Mon Mothma has a very good chance because she is much more diplomatic than Moff Tarkin. She will deploy to oppose him. Now we have Emperor Palpatine attempting to gather intelligence at Kashyyyk. So the Emperor has gone solo onto the planet and is torturing Wookiees with Force lightning. At least that's the way that I want to imagine it. And performing this mission, specifically gather intel, is quite important. It's how you're going to find the Rebel base. Now, those systems where people are unopposed, they will automatically succeed. And that's something, oh, I just realized I didn't have the location on here. Now that is something that is going to be very good for the Rebel Alliance because Corellia will now be sabotaged. With regards to Kashyyyk, we will gather intel. And what would happen with gather intel is for every 4 units at the Rebel base, you draw 1 probe droid card. And there's only 2, so I draw 1. So Dantooine, I now know that they are not at Dantooine. I'm just going to return that to the box for the sake of keeping things clean. Now let's take a look at what's going to happen with regards to these 2 contested areas. So with regards to rule by fear, we'll just Grand Moff Tarkin. I have 1 point in diplomacy, meaning I'm going to roll 1 red die versus Mon Mothma's 3 diplomacy die. And when you get this, that's a failure. This is equal to 1 success. This is also 1 success. The lightsaber is equal to 2 successes. It's not looking too good for Tarkin here, but we'll see what happens. As we roll, Mon Mothma gets a total of 3 successes. Tarkin gets 0, so this mission, with regards to rule by fear, is a failure. Rhodia remains subjugated. Now in the case of Princess Leia versus Darth Vader, as you can see, it is 2 versus 2. And let's see what happens. Take 2 red and 2 black. And I'm just going to roll all 4 of them at once. The red was the Empire, and black was the Rebel Alliance. I'm going to keep it the same as it was. I know I didn't say that before I rolled. But I also want the Rebels to win in this scenario just to show you guys a little bit more how they would potentially build units. So in this case, Princess Leia has succeeded, and Mon Calamari is going to become a Rebel territory. Now you've seen how we resolve the missions. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to cut right here. We're going to get out some more of the tokens. We're going to set up the state of the board after the resolution to those missions, and we'll take a look at combat. Now, as you can see, I've added the sabotage marker, meaning the Imperial player will not be able to build any troops using Corellia. Mon Calamari is now a Rebel-controlled planet. And I just want to talk about a mistake I made with Grand Moff Tarkin, because Rhodia only has 1 resource, and any planet that is subjugated counts as an Imperial planet. You only generate the leftmost resource, which means training stormtroopers. I would have been better off using rule by fear in another scenario. For example, maybe taking Cato Nemordia, Utapau, or another place that could potentially have built us some more ships. Now, I'm just flipping these over so that they're not distracting while we go over what I'm sure you guys are really interested in, combat. Now I'm going to deploy General Tag to Naboo, and he's going to bring along a large force to crush the rebels. As we'll be activating the Star Destroyer, I can bring up to 6 units, which will be 3 TIE Fighters, 2 ATSTs, and an AT-AT. Now the Rebel player has a choice, and one of the reasons why Jan Dodonna was kept in reserve is in order to be able to potentially retreat and save some of your units, you need to be able to activate the system and those units with a commander. So the Rebel player will play Jan Dodonna in response to the Imperial invasion. Now what you'll notice on each of the players is they have a tactics value for space and a tactics value for ground combat. So what will happen is Jan Dodonna gets 2 space tactic cards, which are Concentrate and Onslaught. General Tag gets 1, which is Defensive Formation. He will take 2 of the ground tactic cards, which is Concentrate Fire and Defensive Formation. And then there is Bombardment, which is for the Rebels. Now we've got it set up. So the first thing we have to do is engage in the space battle. Now you take the number of dice related that you can roll right here. And Star Destroyer, as you can see, can roll some pretty nasty stuff. 3 red die, 2 black die, and we bought 3 TIE Fighters. We'll be able to roll another 3 black die. Oof, it's not looking very good. We'll roll all of our damage. So that's 1 hit. We'll roll all of our damage on black here. And we've got 2, so there's 2 hits on black, 1 hit on red, and we can spend to re-roll the tactics die. Sorry, we can spend the 2 sabers here to use some of our tactics cards. And right now, I don't have much that I can really do except potentially block 1 damage. That means, let's take a look at the damage. The Corellian Corvette, we really didn't do too hot there. But we've done 1 damage to the Corellian Corvette. And we will have killed the X-Wing and the Y-Wing. Now, I've gone ahead and just assigned the damage, but don't forget that during the space combat, the Rebel player still gets to take his 2 shots as well as, and also use the tactic cards to potentially block some of the damage. Just for the sake of keeping things clear, I'm going to put this die aside, meaning that I can still use my defensive formation, and we'll see what we get from the Corvette, which is a black and a red. Then with regards to the Y-Wing, we get a red, and we get a black. Roll the Rebel player's die, and we only get 1 direct hit. Sorry, it's not a direct hit. We only get 1 hit on red, so 1 damage to the Star Destroyer. That is not very good. We are not able to use any of the tactics cards because we did not get any tactics rolls. I'll actually spend this to remove that to block 1 damage using the defensive formation. Just discard that over there for now. To block the damage on the Star Destroyer. That means that now the X-Wing and the Y-Wing have been destroyed. We will now then take a look at resolving our first stage of ground combat. Now with the AT-AT, there is a 2 red, 1 black. The ATSCs are basically red and a black. As I have, and then there's another red and another black. We'll roll this to see how the troopers fare. We've got some direct hits, and that doesn't affect us really because those are already on the black die. I will spend the tactics die to re-roll 2 of my die. Got a direct hit, which means this can then be assigned to the troopers. And that will be 3 damage to the rebel troopers, which only have 1 health. Now, instead of just assigning damage this time, I'll go ahead and roll. And we'll see if they're able to do anything to our fearsome force of Imperials. They will get 3 black die. They can spend a tactic card, deal damage equal to the red attack value of one of your ships. But they will spend the bombardment because tactic cards don't carry over. And they can deal 1 damage. Unfortunately, it's not going to be enough. They could deal 1 damage to the ATSC or the AT-AT, but as they have 2 to 3 health, it's just not going to be enough to defeat them. At this case, we then resolve the combat, and the 3 rebel troopers have died. Now, what would happen is that there would be another combat round unless one of the players chooses to retreat. And in this case, the rebels have been badly defeated at Naboo. The best thing to do would be to have Jan the Donna pull out and escape on the Corvette, thereby ending combat and also not being in a terrible situation. We will remove the damage. All damage is cleared at the end of combat. And then we will place an Imperial subjugation marker over Naboo, as the system is still loyal to the rebels, but is now under Imperial control, meaning that the Empire can use the leftmost resource when it comes to the refresh phase, which we are now going to be getting into. And we'll show you guys how to build some units and also recruit some new leaders. And then what I'll do after that is we'll go through just another full turn, but doing it properly, not just bringing it down step by step, for those of you that want to see everything sort of brought together. So stay tuned, and we're going to get through to the refresh phase. And at last, we've come to the final part of our how to play, the refresh phase. Now, there are 2 things I'm going to highlight, actually 3, just before we get into the refresh phase. First, you'll notice the tactic cards that I'd left out have been returned to their respective piles. They are only available to the combat that they were drawn on, so you cannot carry them on into another turn. Now, you'll also notice that the cards that were played with regards to mission cards have been returned to the game box. Once you play them, you cannot use them again. And you'll notice that I have separated some action cards. We have 4 Imperial action cards, and here we have 6 Rebel action cards. Now, the reason why the Rebels have more is because they relate to C-3PO and R2-D2. And I did make a mistake. During the setup, what you would normally do is each player is going to start with 2 action cards, and the others are then returned to the deck. So, just going back in time a little bit, we will then just deal out these 2 starting action cards, and you can tell that they're the starting ones as they do not have the recruit symbol. You return the others to the game box. All right, we're caught up, we're good, we're ready to go. Let's go through the refresh phase. Now, the first thing that you're going to do during the refresh phase is you will recall all of your leaders. You'll recall Dodonna, Riken, Mon Mothma, and Princess Leia for the Rebels. And we will get back General Tag, Grand Moff Tarkin, Emperor Palpatine, and Darth Vader for the Imperials. Now, the next part is very simple. You're going to draw 2 new mission cards. Now, in this case, we'll take a quick look at them. We have Homing Beacon, which you can attempt against a captured leader. If successful, this leader is rescued. The rebel player must place this leader in any system in the rebel base's region. So that's a great way to help find the rebel base. Detain, attempt against a rebel leader that is any system. If successful, that leader does not return to the leader pool during the next refresh phase. So you can detain the leaders, which is good because it can limit your opponent's resources. So those are just 2 examples of the missions. As you can see here, the Imperial player currently has 4, which is the same for the Rebel player. We now have 6 because we drew the 2 cards. And as long as we don't go over 10 mission cards, we don't have to discard any. The moment you get up to 11, 12, you got to discard back down to 10. We're not going to spend too much more time on the mission cards. As you play, you guys will learn more about it. I'm just going to deal 2 more out to the Rebel player. And we've gotten that taken care of. So we are moving on to what I like to call sort of the faction-specific part of the refresh phase. Now the Imperial player will draw 2 cards from the Imperial droid, the probe droid deck. This time we've got Felucia and Dagobah. That means that those locations are not locations of the Rebel base. I'll put that information aside. It is always available to the Imperial player to help them locate the base once they have revealed the information. Now the Rebel player will attempt to move closer to their objective of liberating the galaxy. They draw an objective card, just 1 in the case of this one. Start of refresh phase. Play if at least 4 Rebel systems contain at least a Rebel unit. So in that case, if there had been actually 4 Rebel systems, or by the end of next turn, if there are 4 Rebel systems, each with a Rebel unit, well, in that case, the Rebel player can play that card, moving closer to their objective of winning the game. Now we're going to get into what is at least one of my favorite parts about the refresh phase. It is the recruit and build phase. Now, as you can see, there is the recruit icon and the build icon. So as you move up the track, you will be told what you're going to be doing during that refresh phase. As we are on now getting into turn 2, we are going to be recruiting new leaders as well as building some units. What you do when you recruit leaders, you draw the top 2 cards, take a look at who they are, and you are able to keep one, and you can recruit any of the corresponding leaders that are associated with the 2 cards that you've drawn. You've got Santir Fel, Admiral Ozzel, who got choked out by Vader. Not a good one. And Moff Gerarad. Not too sure who Moff Gerarad is, actually. Probably someone from the EU I don't know very well, but I've always liked Santir Fel. And it is a scouting mission, which can be good. I'm going to take Santir Fel. The action card will then be added to my action deck, with this card being discarded, and just for the purposes of showing you guys, it is going to go back to the game box. Now with regards to the Rebel leader, we will draw 2 cards. We've got Wedge Antilles, and if I'm not mistaken there, that's Crix Madine. It's not even a question for me, it's Wedge Antilles. He's the guy that I want to recruit. And this other card is now being returned to the game box. We will recruit the heroes, the leader, Santir Fel, and Wedge Antilles to the leader pool. We're now going to take a look at building units. I'm going to focus on these systems just a little bit more because they're closer to the camera. It's going to give you a better view as to what's actually going on, but we're still going to explain the entire build phase for all of the systems that are currently in either Rebel or Imperial hands. Now, don't forget, Megiddo is subjugated, meaning that the Imperial player can only use the leftmost icon. Now, I'm just going to take a quick look at Naboo. I thought it was Rhodia and Naboo, because there is a Rebel loyalty marker, but the Empire has subjugated the world, meaning it does not count as a Rebel planet, and the Imperial player may build the leftmost icon. Now, what are you able to do during a build phase? Well, you take a look at what you're able to build. As you can see, it is the the blue triangle. So anything blue corresponds with space. As you know, anything yellow, orangish, that corresponds with ground. So in the case of my Jito, the Imperial player can then build a TIE fighter. The blue triangle corresponds to the TIE fighter. And you can see that there is a number right here. This is number 2. Felucia has number 1. Seleucami is number 1. Mon Calamari number 3. And even the Rebel base, you can see right there, is number 1. What you then do is you build the unit corresponding to those places where you have influence, if you're the Empire, or control. And for the Rebel Alliance, just the ones that you have control. You then build those units and place them at the corresponding spot on the build track. We have the Imperial build track here and the Rebel build track. So we'll take a look at my Jito first. Now we've got a 1 TIE fighter that goes on build slot 2. We'll add that now to the build track. On Seleucami, it is the ATST, which is what corresponds to the yellowish circle. That goes on spot 1 of the build track. We've got Mon Calamari for the Rebel Alliance. That means they can build either an X-Wing, because it is the triangle, X-Wing, Y-Wing, Rebel transport, and a Mon Calamari cruiser. You know we want that cruiser for the Rebels. We got to get some firepower built for us. And right now, judging from the state of affairs, we probably want an X-Wing. Just kind of want to blow up that Death Star. We just recruited Wedge. He needs something to fly, right? We will get the X-Wing added to the build track in Space 3. And we've now covered this half of the board. But don't forget, there is the Rebel base. Now with regards to the Rebel base, it is the blue and yellow triangles, which means a Rebel trooper, and then once again an X-Wing, Y-Wing, or a transport. Now building a transport is not a bad idea, not something that I necessarily want to do though. I don't feel that there's really need for a transport right now. I'd like to get some more space defenses for the Rebel base. There aren't any. We will build a Y-Wing. Just get a nice contingent of ships going on there. And I made a mistake. That's actually good. I put the Y-Wing in the 3 spot. It goes in the 1 spot as it corresponds to on the Rebel base icon. And we get 1 Rebel trooper. Now let's take a look at Corellia. You'll notice here that Corellia has been sabotaged. A great move by the Rebel player, meaning that the Imperial player cannot build anything out of Corellia. As Corellia is a shipbuilding world, as you'll find out in Solo, a Star Wars story. Not able to build a new Star Destroyer. That would have been awesome. Nor am I able to build a TIE fighter to go with it. So for right now, Corellia is useless. We've got Coruscant, which will always be providing resources to the Imperial player. It is 1 Stormtrooper. Stormtroopers correspond to that orangish triangle. Let's take a look at Rhodia. Rhodia is the circle, which represents an airspeeder for the Rebel Alliance at spot 1. Rhodia is subjugated. It is also a Stormtrooper. Naboo, even though it's Lord of the Rebels, is subjugated by the Empire and produces another Stormtrooper for the Imperials. And then lastly, we have Mustafar, which gives us some nice stuff. It's decent. It gives us the assault carrier, as well as a TIE fighter on Space 2. And that is your build phase. Now the final phase, well, not final phase, I don't like that. The final part of the refresh phase is deploying. You then move everything down the build track and deploy any troops that would basically come off the board. So I will then be deploying the ATST and the 3 Stormtroopers. And just for the sake of keeping things clean and neat, we also have a ship there. They will be deployed to my Jito, where they can potentially ride on the assault carrier. We will then move the 2 TIE fighters and the assault carrier down to Space 1. For the Rebel Alliance, I will just be deploying their troops that are ready to go to the Rebel base. I I don't want to make it too complicated with regards to getting units out there. You will slide the Moncal Cruiser and the X-Wing to the second space on the build track. And that is the end of your refresh phase. You're now going to start over with the assignments phase, deploying your missions, and getting right back into the game. Now, I know I said I was considering doing a full turn again, but I've been thinking about some other things that we could do with some nice Rebellion video content, and any more Rebellion stuff is going to be saved for future videos. So now we're going to go to my review of the game. Hope you guys enjoy it, and keep it right here. Well, Star Wars Rebellion, what do I think of the game? Well, I really enjoy this game. If you are a Star Wars fan, and as you can see right here, I've got the gear on for it, and you've always wanted to play your own version of the original trilogy, well, this is a game for you. With over 150 plastic miniatures, you guys saw just a little bit of them as we showed you guys the components. You've got a lot of stuff in there. It's a lot of fun, and I really like being able to either be the Empire and hunt down the rebels, or be the ragtag rebel fleet and do our best to defeat the Empire. And that's where I have to say the game really shines. Corey Konetsu did a great job of giving, well, I won't say giving, I'm going to say keeping the game balanced. While the Empire is very powerful and oppressing, you do have a little bit of an advantage, I feel, from the Empire standpoint when you're starting the game. If the rebels play smart, they move strategically across the map, set up their bases and systems of like points of power and control far away from the Empire's eye, and makes it more difficult for them to be stopped, you can really build up a fleet that can contest with the Empire. The other thing that I liked really are the cards, the commanders, and the abilities that you do get from some of those cards, like the card 1 in a million that really lets you destroy the Death Star with a lucky shot. When I played this the last time with Julie, to be honest there, because after that she didn't want to play again, I set a trap for her. I had my fleet out there, and she came in with her fleet and the Death Star, and she proceeded to decimate the capital ships. But she neglected the snub fighters, just like as you heard in A New Hope, they say, oh, those fighters, they're too small, they can't possibly hurt the battle station. Well, she forgot the snub fighters, and I blew up her Death Star using the 1 in a million card. The other thing I really like about the game is the fact that it's thematic, and it really captures the Star Wars theme. This is definitely the Galactic Civil War. When you're playing the Empire and the Rebels, they feel and play different enough. I don't want to say completely different because you're doing the same things, but they definitely do not play identically. You cannot take on the Empire as the Rebels in a straight up like forced battle. You have to be a little bit more crafty and think things through as to how you're going to potentially defeat Darth Vader and the Emperor. I do like the fact that in the game you do get Luke Skywalker, but he's not necessarily a Jedi Knight unless you can get him to go through Jedi training, which really takes you through the original trilogy setup. There's also a little bit of variety that you do get based on the commanders that you use, and also some of the commanders that you're able to select, as you saw in the setup phase. And one neat thing that I do like is also the ability to potentially capture commanders, get them off the board, or even turn one to the dark side. That's a really cool thing, as you saw in Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, the Emperor wanted to twist Luke to the dark side. And with some of the cards and certain characters like Darth Vader capturing, a certain leader, you can twist him to the dark side. I mean, this is really going to be your own version of the original trilogy in about 4 hours. And you know what? If you're playing even a longer game, when you come to think about it, I think the whole Star Wars trilogy runs about 6 hours. So there you go. You're definitely getting the trilogy in a box. Now, just to talk about some of the negatives with regards to the game. Now, the game is long. This is the game that you're really going to have to put aside a large chunk of time to play. Whether it is, maybe like 5 or 6 hours, especially if this is going to be your first time playing, you really need to be able to teach the game to somebody. Well, the rule book is very good, I must say. I love the rules reference, guys, and I love the Learn to Play that lets you take it out, get the game set up, and get it started. When you are teaching a new person, it can take a little bit longer. And while there are 150 plastic miniatures, and I love the miniatures in the game, especially the Star Destroyers, some of the other ones feel a little bit cheap and a little bit flimsy. I did have one of the TIE fighters break just when I was going ahead and setting them up. So I was able to fix it luckily with Crazy Glue quite easily, but you're not getting the best quality out of all the miniatures, largely due to the size. And that makes sense. They're trying to pack a ton into this box to make sure that you're gonna have a great experience with the game. And also you're really going to get that original trilogy feel. But that being said, the negatives that I have are really minor. The board is great. The production quality is very, very well done across everything on the board. I love the fact that you've got both Death Stars, the fully constructed one, and then the half constructed one that you can build later on. Fantasy Flight has really taken everything about the original trilogy and put it in this box and given you a way to play the game as a 2 to 4 player game. Now that brings me to the last negative that I want to talk about, the 4-player version of this game. Now, I have only played this as a 2-player game, but I don't understand why I'd ever want to play this as a 4-player game. Essentially, what you're doing in a 4-player game, 2 players are working together to control the factions. Now, while it might be fun in terms of just debating and discussing strategy, it's almost the same as 1 player playing the game. If one person is more experienced and they're on the same side as maybe a less experienced player, they're pretty much going to be making all of the decisions, and that other second player is just going to be carrying it out. There is no difference in terms of the turn sequence. It's really just 2 players controlling their pool of miniatures and leaders. And that can be fun. I do like the fact that you can play 4 players. It does make it a lot easier to get this out on a game night, but I still think you're going to get a better experience just 2 players straight up head to head in that epic battle. But the game is hard to get out due to its length. Now, what I'm going to give this game for a final review, I give this an 8.5 out of 10. It's a fun game. It is that epic war. It is perfectly thematic and does a great job of capturing Star Wars and, like I've said before, putting Star Wars in a box. And it's a great game. If you love war games, tactical games, and you're a big Star Wars fan, you should definitely pick this up. Now, take a look up above, either right now or shortly thereafter. You're going to be seeing links to our other videos. And don't forget, down below in the video description, you can find the links to our social media channels. Stay in touch with us, find out what's going on, get the latest info as to when our next video will be released. And as always here on Dice and Dragons, we're going to end it with grabbing our drink. And we are going to grab our saber. And this Jedi's coming for the Empire. I'm going to take you down. And don't forget, guys, keep playing games.